Well, good morning, ahoy. Hey, thanks for coming and hanging out on this Sunday morning. It's a little bit different. Haven't we been blessed that we haven't had to do too many of these recently? And so certainly Friday afternoon caught us on the hop. We were ready to go into the Unite Creative Conference, but here we are back in my lockdown chair. Anyway, so thank you so much for coming and being with us. I've loved some of our conversations already online, some of the comments coming up, and it's been a delight just to be able to touch base with you again. I've been away on leave for a couple of weeks. Thank you so much for helping Karen and I and the kids get away for a couple of weeks. And we just sort of thought that we weren't going to miss this opportunity just to get together, encourage each other one more time, pray with each other, and absolutely believe that we're only going to be doing this for a 1 week, and we will be back in person next Sunday morning. So a couple of things just before I get going is, first of all, to all the teams that have helped Karen and I get away, thank you. Thank you, Gary, for another incredible message. Pastor Sam, awesome job. Laura and Kate and all of the teams with Compassion Sunday. Wow, a whole bunch more kids sponsored, and we just loved the heart of our church. And then again, we were ready to press play for the Creative Conference, but we had to press pause instead. But Jesse and Felicity had nearly 70 regos, which is just phenomenal, guys. And I know that next year, we're going to launch this all over again, and it's going to be just brilliant. So first of all, thank you so much for that. And as I've already said, I'm looking forward to being back with you in person next Sunday. But what I do want to do is I just want to take a minute to acknowledge, look, some of us, we're sort of seeing this 3-day snap lockdown as a bit of a long weekend, and if that's where you're at, that's awesome. Hope you have a brilliant time with your family. Hope you get to some time to relax and look each other in the face. Hope you're not just binging too hard on Netflix, but you're actually making the most of this weekend. And if you're enjoying it, praise God. But I guess there's also a whole bunch of us, and many of our brothers and sisters aren't going to do a 3-day lockdown quite as easily. There's not going to be anybody in their home. We can say, and I'm not trying to be frivolous, that that does mean that we're not alone. There might be no one in your home, but we're not alone. But that doesn't always make it any easier. Some of us are doing a parenting solo with kids wet and windy, and it's just a whole bunch of crazy. And some of us, this is actually going to usher in new levels or revisiting levels of stress and a sense of isolation. And Karen and I just want to let you know, our thoughts and our prayers are with you. We do understand, and we, not just as a couple, but we as a church and a whole bunch of people would love to be able to chat with you, talk with you, and find some online ways of being able to just, again, reiterate that you're not alone in this time. And so if this is a tricky time for you, please know that we're praying for you. Please reach out, and thank you for being with us this morning. So what I want to do is I want to dive in and look, I guess, at a passage that the Lord's been speaking to me about over the last couple of weeks. And I don't have time to unpack all of it. I'm going to give you some homework. I'm going to give you something to go and read at the end of this. So if you actually don't have a Bible, you can download one on our church app. And you can download the YouVersion, and you'll be able to find a whole smash of different translations in there. And again, someone in our online team will gladly help you find that. But I'm going to give you some things to read. But this morning in Mark 3, it really is an incredible passage. And it says this. So Mark 3 there's a series of small stories about the way that Jesus meets with the church, he meets with the community, and then the way that he actually meets with his disciples, his best friends, and he actually calls us friends. At the beginning of Mark 3, he goes to the synagogue, and there is a whole bunch of Pharisees, a whole bunch of religious leaders there, a whole bunch of people who certainly know how to read the Bible but don't know the author of it. And they've brought a man into that gathering with we call it a withered hand, and they're looking for a reason to accuse Jesus of doing something good on their holy day. Can you believe it? And Jesus actually heals this man, and the Pharisees from that moment on start looking for a way to condemn him and ultimately crucify him. Jesus leaves the temple, the synagogue, and goes down to the edges of the Sea of Galilee, where I guess it's the lowest place. It's one of the easiest spaces to get to. And there the crowds are so great, he has to preach from a boat because they were pushing him back into the water. And there it says he preached and he shared the good news and he revealed the heartbeat of the Father and healed all of their sick. And then from that moment, he heads up a mountainside, and that's where we pick up Mark 3:13. And it says this: Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have the authority to drive out demons. The Matthew translation of this actually says that he sent them out to preach and heal all the sick. But I don't know if you caught the true essence of what Jesus was calling his disciples to do here. And beloved, it hasn't changed. Jesus went up on a mountainside, and we're going to talk about this mountainside in just a minute, and he called to those he wanted, and they came to him. He is calling everybody because he desires everybody. The word actually says that his heart is that all mankind would be saved. He healed all the sick. He is not angry with anybody. 2 Corinthians 5 tells us that we are his ambassadors to go into all the world and say, God's not angry, come home. And so he calls all to him. But he appointed 12 that they might be with him and then he might send them out to preach. I don't know if you got that again. That they might be with him. Nothing has changed. He still calls those who are really going to seek him, sit with him, know intimacy and authority. He calls them into isolated places. He calls us to commit. He calls us to go up a mountainside. The invitation is to all, but few choose it. But the number one priority of God's heartbeat to us is not that we perform, not that we preach, not that we heal, but that we are with him. And he called them that they might be with him. You know, you've got a Father, you've got a Savior, you've got Jesus, who actually says, my number one priority in all of this eternity is to be with you, is to know you and to be known by you. That's crazy good news. That is such a blessing. That he has prepared good things for us to do. Ephesians tells us that he has prepared good works in advance for us to go and do. He has prepared the giants for us to slay and mountains for us to conquer and seas for us to cross and families for us to raise and sicknesses for us to heal and messages that we get to preach and revelations we get to unpack in word or deed to the world. But it starts with Jesus just wanting to be with you. I love that. He went to the synagogue and he went to the seaside, but he called us to come to him as disciples to be with him. And there is a choice. There is a choice. There's some fascinating parallels in here that the Pharisees received nothing, the crowds received something, but the disciples received everything. The Pharisees got rebuked, the people got healing released, but the disciples had their purpose revealed. You see the difference, what happens when we come to be with him. We're going to talk about that in a minute more, but I'm hoping you'll be fanning a desire to be with him. The crowds came just to take from him, but when the disciples chose to go to him, they didn't take from him. They were transformed by him. And it really is only a transformed life that can transform another life. You know, his anger burned against the Pharisees in their religious zeal. They rejected relationship with Jesus, and they rejected seeing a broken man restored. And his anger burned against them. But his affection burns for you so that we could come into intimacy with him. So we could actually come and pray the prayer that Jesus gave to his disciples to pray, the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father. That we would know that, not his Father, not the Father, not a Father, but our Father, that we would be with him, that we could pray, Our Father, I know where you are. You are in heaven, and let your kingdom of peace, of joy, of right relationship, let your kingdom come into this earth and onto earth, and let your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. This is the promise to those who would pursue him in intimacy. This is what happens when we have to climb up a mountainside to be with him. He calls us up. He will go down to the low places and he will heal. He will go into the hard places, the religious places, and reveal. But when he really wants to infuse his heart with ours, when we really want to move into places of deep intimacy and therefore deep authority, he calls us to come up a mountainside with him. You know, the mountainside actually is a place where we do actually have to choose. The mountainside isn't a place where there's shops. There's not sporting fields on the mountainside. There's not Netflix on the mountainside. There's not school on the mountainside. There's not washing up on the mountainside. There's not your to-do list. You actually have to make a decision to leave the low places and to leave the worry, the hustle, and the bustle. You have to leave behind the stress, the condemnation. You have to leave behind the doubt and the anxiety to climb up into his presence, into rarefied air. It's actually not quite as difficult as sometimes we make it out to be. And the more you practice it, and after all, we're practicing Christians, right? The more we practice it, the easier it gets. The more we actually stop and turn off and turn away and turn to him, the more often we practice that, the easier it gets. You see, the truth is this: the abiding life is the abundant life. And I don't mean the abundant life, the name of our church. I mean an abundant life overflowing with peace and joy, overflowing with a gentleness and a kindness, steadfast, faithful, and faith-filled, a life which is both obedient and powerful, a life which is fragrant and fun. The abiding life is the abundant life. John 15 tells us that like branches in a vine, if we're cut off, we can't do anything. It says, apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus understood that in Mark 3:14, that he called us that we might be with him, the true source of our power, the true source of our peace, the true source of your purpose is found in his presence, and he calls you up. We've been given a weekend, we've been given a couple of days to pause, to stop, to maybe reflect before we hit the commotion of Christmas, before we hit that crush of time pressure and the worries about money, to pause, to come up onto a mountain with him and to say, hey, Father, there's so many things for me to leave behind. There's so many things for me to step into. But the foundation for all of it, the leaving and the receiving, has got to be with my relationship with you. So a little bit of homework is actually to start maybe having a look at your week and start saying, and not just this week, but weeks to come, start saying, where can I take some time to slide up that mountain with Jesus? And some cases, it may feel like a bit of a slog. By the time you get to the top, you may feel a little bit breathless. But understand this, the mountains that were around Jerusalem weren't as tall as Mount Wellington. They were around that sort of 570 mark, about half that height. And in fact, the mountain that Jesus called his disciples up to wasn't Mount Tabor. It wasn't even that high. It wasn't Mount of Olives. It was more of a hill, but it was still a place that he calls us up and out of and up and into. But the first couple of forays up that mountainside, yeah, you may be a little bit breathless, but I promise you, when you find peace and purpose there, when you find his presence there, his promises there, you'll want to keep coming back. We do that by carving out some time. Have a look at your week. We do that by carving out some time away from the television, maybe away from some of the other things which seek to entertain us, and that God is actually asking us to enter into. And we can do that in the Word. Read Mark 3. Read John 13 to 17. John 13 to 17, those 4 chapters, it's a 10-minute read probably for all of it, is actually that last meal that Jesus had with those disciples. It was actually that last meal that he had with those disciples, and before he entered into the betrayal, the scourging, and the crucifixion. And so the way that Jesus models that from intimacy, culminating in this intimacy, is just brilliant. And if you really wanted to treat yourself, read Psalm 118. And they believe that that was the hymn that Jesus sang before he went out to pray his final prayers and to ultimately be betrayed, arrested, and crucified. Read Psalm 118 as a song that Jesus sang from intimacy with his Father before he faced his crucifixion, and wonder what it looks like for us to have the same level of intimacy with him. He calls us to be with him. I want to pray with you. Thank you for your comments which have been coming up. Hey, Father, you want to be with me. You want to be with my brothers and sisters online, not online, but in person, in our person. Jesus, for my brothers and sisters who struggle to get up the mountainside, I'm going to ask that you're going to just continue to encourage them, to call them. And when they get into your presence, you're going to pour out such a blessing. You're going to pour out such peace and joy and purpose that we are going to be so hungry and so thirsty to run back into your presence, not just every morning, but morning, noon, and night. Father God, I ask that for my brothers and sisters who are feeling isolated, that you are going to speak to them that they are not alone and that your presence is there and real and near. My God, for us as we start to move towards Christmas and we've had this chance to pause, to acknowledge you want to be with us in the midst of all of the activity, in the midst of all of the trial, in the midst of all the terror, in the midst of all the doubt. Father, you want to be with us, and that we're going to take a couple of hours over the next couple of days to figure out with you how we can spend time again with you. Hey, God bless you. We'd love to keep finding ways to connect with you the next couple of days. Hope that you can find your way into a connect group before the end of the year. There's only a couple more left, but reach out. We'd love to help you find that way. We really believe that we'll be with you again on Sunday morning in person. Cannot wait for that. But as always, stay in tune. Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, our email. It will continue to let you know what's new and what's coming up. Until then, hey, God bless you. Thanks for hanging out, and go and love somebody.